to the press report. All right. Today's news, Chicago City Council passed the budget. The budget does not include any new property taxes. One of the things I wanted to point out within that budget, let's back up. Back in 2007, the city went through a similar thing where they went through a budget deficit. It's pretty much the same thing every year. Back in 2007, it was proposed that the parking meters be leased off to a private company. It was the worst decision ever. That private company is owned by some silent partners in United Arab Emirates. So all of the city's money and taxpayers' money is going overseas. You can see Dubai has been built up since. That those parking meters were leased off for $1.1 billion for a 75-year lease. So right now we're probably 17 to 18 years into that lease. We got about 50 some years to go. And that $1.1 billion was soaked up within the first 18 months of that deal. All right. And so some people may say that when it comes to public finances, that politicians wouldn't be so loose with their own finances. But when it comes to public dollars, they're just so frivolous. And so selling those parking meters put us in a bad predicament. They should have made the necessary cuts back then to avoid such. And here we are 17 to 18 years later in the same thing. So there are no new property taxes within this deal. One of the things that was in the news cycle heavily this week was that the vice mayor was going to have a budget of $400,000. Let me be very clear. Now, I'm no fan of any of it, but the $400,000 wouldn't necessarily go to a salary for the vice mayor. It would go to his committee budget, because the vice mayor is a committee unto itself, right? And so it would go to a committee budget for staff and office and all of that. And trust me, I grew up patronage, but just you're fattening up these government offices that doesn't necessarily need it. There was one alderman, Brendan Riley, where he used to be the vice mayor. He did it on a budget of zero, right? So there was more ways just for the mayor to kind of soften up and sweeten the deal for people to vote for his budget package. The budget package narrowly passed, but it did pass. But people wanted to see more cuts. City of Chicago is a city literally unto itself. City has probably 34 to 38,000 employees. You know, that's more than some small towns got. All right. Cook County probably has about the same. The state is probably triple that. Right. So there's a lot of fat in these government offices. And like I said, I grew up patronage. I'm all for someone having a job, but it should not come at the expense of dreadful deficits and at the expense of people who are already robbing Peter to pay Paul and don't have the finances and are struggling to provide for themselves and their families. All right. And so that budget package has passed. That passed yesterday, probably around 5 o'clock. The next budget is going to be 8-9 months away. And so it'll be interesting to see how things line up from this point on. But that budget package passed on a narrow vote of 27 to 23, and it's $17.3 billion in spending. And that's kind of the thing. Budget deal at a big cost, right? And so I'm glad some of the aldermen, it took them a lifetime to stand up. We haven't seen this kind of revolt since 1987, since the days of Harold Washington. So I'm glad that some of the aldermen stood up. Well, it wasn't enough, but They talk about police overtime and all these things. Police cannot stop crime, especially from these tactics. Now, back in the 90s when I was growing up, they did have some small police areas where the police were actively involved in the community. The Slick Boys were one of them. Look that up. Chicago Police Slick Boys. But those programs are gone. And so law enforcement is a response. And we know the response times have been slow. By the time you get there, if you're responding fast, 3 to 7 minutes, the crime is over with, right? So if you're not there talking to these young guys, pointing them in the right direction, saying, go here, go apply for a job, use me as a resource, I'm the officer in this community. None of that stuff is going on. That can be justified over time. But just pad the payroll and to say I make 6 figures, that stuff has to stop, right? And so we have to start putting this money where it belongs, where it's needed. All right. And so we're just going to look out for that and watch out for that to see, how this unfolds and how it swells into the next budget year. But moving right along. So there have been a lot of drone sightings on the eastern seaboard, New Jersey, Georgia, New York, those type of areas. People are kind of in a frenzy and up in arms because there's probably never been these many drone sightings at one time, clustered together. And that's kind of the anomaly right now. But from my perspective, and this is just facts, right? I'm going to read you guys some numbers. All right, and this is from the these particular numbers are from the Federal Aviation Commission or the Federal Aviation Administration. And this is as of October 1st, 2024. There are 791,597,000 drones registered. So a little bit under 800,000 drones are registered. Commercial drones are a little bit under 400,000, 396. Recreational drones are 387,000. There are 7,500 paper registrations and 415,000 remote pilot certified drone operators, and 883,000 trust certificates have been issued, right? So there are a lot of drones in the sky, right? Still less than 1% of the U.S. population, but you're talking about and these are just, who knows how many have been bought in the last 3 months. This is Christmas time. People are buying things. And drones, some of these drones are cheaper than a TV, right? So you probably got 1 million drones in the airspace. And we think about that number and think about just the air traffic. Drones fly under a certain amount of feet. I think probably 5,000 feet and under for some of them. And then the commercials are a little higher. But when you really think about the number of drones that are out there, sightings and seeing them are not that far-fetched. Now, some people are speculating that it's China and there's something more sinister going on. Hey, we will never have definitive proof, but one thing that we do know is that we've been lied to since the inception of time, right? And so I don't believe in the conspiracy theories. I believe in the conspiracy, because once we follow our spirit and once we have some small facts, there's no longer theory no more. It's a conspiracy, right? And so I remember when I was 8, maybe 1992. We're from Cabrini Green housing projects, but for a small amount of time we lived in Lathrop Home housing projects, which is 2 or 3 miles north of Cabrini. So during the early 90s, I was back and forth between those 2 housing projects. So this is 92. It's late at night. It's probably 10 or 11, probably a little later, who knows. Me and my mom are waiting for the bus. During these hours, at this time, the Clybourne bus ran down Clybourne. That line has been shut down. But back then it ran from probably like 7 in the morning to like probably 8 at night. All right. So at this time it had stopped running. The only other bus for us to get home was either the Halsted bus to Diversey or the Brown line to Diversey, because the Brown line, the Diversey bus takes you right to Lathrop Homes Projects. So we're waiting at this bus stop. It seems like forever, probably 20 or 30 minutes, if not longer. As we're waiting, me and my mom, we look up in the sky, not too far up, and we see something flying, hovering in the sky, probably about, because it was right over. And keep in mind, this is '92, so the housing projects are in full fledged. But it was on the west side of Division, probably 500 feet from the next public housing project. So I think there's a 3-story building that's still there next to a gas station. In that 3-story building, the unidentified flying object that I saw, that me and my mom saw, it was probably 200 to 300 feet right above the 3-story building. And it just hovered and spent with lights. Now, keep in mind, the first drone, according to the U.S. government, the first drone to hit U.S. airspace was in 1989. But of course, the regular population probably didn't know about drones until somewhere in the 2000s. And then they got popular in the 2010s. So it sat there and hovered. And that was my first encounter with a unidentified flying object. So I said it to say that they're having a lot of things in our airspace. Some of it is probably just recreational. Some of it is probably sinister. Some of it is probably some type of program that's targeted or testing in the testing phase. It's a lot of things that you can pack into that. And so we just to sit back and watch. Like I just read these numbers. There's so many things going on in the drone diaspora. I actually want me a drone personally, but I just don't think that is that far-fetched, because if we know how this government operates, and the fact that these things are on the recreational market, it doesn't make it that much of a theory. All right. And so, moving along, for our health update, and this happened just recently in October, but it wasn't really talked about, but I think it's important. So Siete, if you guys know that company, Siete was a Mexican owned family operation. Siete means 7. And they started, I think, way back in the 90s, where they made tortillas, chips, sauces, seasonings. Most of the product is not alkaline, but it's plant-based and it's healthy to a certain extent. Natural ingredients. A lot of their chips, tortilla chips, use cassava root over corn or grain. But a lot of the things is it's not loaded with salt. It's not loaded with a lot of GMO and chemicals. So if you want a good tortilla chip, or even, I don't do, white potatoes are not as healthy, but even if you want just regular potato chips, Siete was their company you went to. And like I said, they have sauces and seasons and everything. Tortillas not really like a real big fan of them. They use gum, but they were one of the last companies of that diaspora to offer such product. So back in October, PepsiCo acquired the entire company for $1.2 billion, right? And so a lot of people, a lot of consumers are not happy about that, because They're worried about the integrity of the ingredients. And if you know major corporations and major companies who have used high fructose corn syrup and all types of other GMO ingredients in their product, you have to think and have to worry about a company like PepsiCo getting a hold of a natural company like Siete. So they just got in October, so it's going to take a while for things to kick in, but be on the lookout. And I always tell people this. This is why you have to always read labels, because you can be an impulse buyer and be used to just grabbing things off your shelf and just be used to buying things, and you grab something and now the ingredients have changed because the company has changed. All right. And so be on the lookout for that. PepsiCo has acquired Siete. I'm just reading a little bit of the press release. It says today announced that it has entered into a definitive agreement to acquire Garza Food Ventures LLC, DBA Siete Foods, for $1.2 billion. The acquisition will complement PepsiCo's portfolio with an addition of an authentic Mexican-American brand, while also growing its better-for-you food offerings. So it's giving you the synopsis of what their foundation is, and they're kind of hinting at continuing that, but be wary. It says Siete products will bring a rich new aspect to the PepsiCo multicultural portfolio with delicious food that plays an important role in meal occasions and culinary experiences. All right, and so we'll just have to be on the lookout for that. We'll see where it leads, and that's our weekly update for the press report.